Everybody, welcome back to the Reds Rundown podcast. This is by two lifelong Reds fans and journalists. I'm Rob, he's Joe, and we appreciate you taking the time to join us today. Joe, we're both in different locations today, and I feel like you're in a much more fun location right now. You want to let us know where you're at?
Yeah, I'm at the Outer Banks getting some work done next to the beach. Always good to get a nice reset and to have a little bit of a calming presence when some of these close games are going on for the Reds.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, it's been wild for our Redlegs to say the least. But hey, Joe, we thought they'd be out of it by now. Clearly, they're not. So I think that's really all we could ask for at this point.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we're still in it. That's the good news. We had weeks where we said if they lose, 4 or 5 games that they're out of it. They ended up winning 3 or 4 games and staying in it. And this week too, we said before the week, hey, at least win two. Just kind of stick with things. And guess what, Rob? They won two. So that they did exactly the minimum for this past week. That's fine. I'm not going to say that we played great baseball at all because it wasn't great baseball. But sometimes it's just about getting the wins and figuring stuff out later.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. And I think, Joe, the important part, at least for me, is that a lot of these games are close. And I think that that'll tie in a little bit to our question of the day, actually, which is going to be, can the Reds actually beat good teams, Joe? We're going to dive into that, you and I, here in a little bit. But it's a conversation that I know you and I have had multiple times offline and also online. So I'm really looking forward to that. But if you don't have anything else, I'm going to jump us into our recap.
Mhm. Absolutely.
Awesome. All right. So it was a 5-3 loss for the Reds in the first game of the Guardians series. As a reminder, we only played 5 games this week. We had the Tuesday, Wednesday series against the Guardians, and then the 3 games over the weekend against the Brewers. But a 5-3 loss for our Redlegs. Candy was still hitting. The rest of the team looked pretty solid overall, honestly. And the Reds had Emmanuel Clase on the ropes in the ninth inning, and they were just unable to kind of finish that game out or bring it all the way back, which was a bit of a disappointment. You head into game two, and we call that the Candyman game. At least that's what I'm calling it right now. He was the entire offense with a solo home run and a 3-run home run. The Reds were able to win that game as well, thanks to, I believe it was Nicola Dolo who was pitching. Sorry, I don't have that up right now. But we continue on into the Brewer series. Hunter Green was okay. He was not great, but it was a 6-5 win for the Reds on Friday night. Alexis Diaz got some help from his defense and also was hurt by his defense in the ninth inning. He is a topic of conversation I think Joe and I will have to discuss at some point here as we get closer to the trade deadline, to be honest with you. But the Reds were able to win on a big throw from Will Benson at home and then also a random Blake Perkins pop up bunt with 2 outs, which was arguably one of the worst decisions I've ever seen a player make, to be completely honest with you, Joe. Then it was a 3-1 loss to the Brewers. The Reds were able to get a run in the ninth inning. Andrew Abbott pitched well, but gave up a 3-run home run. Really, the only bad pitch of the game for him. He was teetering here and there, but had been able to keep himself in the game for the most part. And then the Sunday game, Reds do lose at home. They get 2 men on base. Stu Fairchild gets thrown out, unfortunately, at home. On a relatively close play, I guess you could say. It was unfortunate because it really felt like they had the Brewers also on the ropes, and yet again we lose another close 1-run game. But Joe, I will say we both said, "Hey, win at least one of these." I think we both predicted 1-1 and 1-2, if I remember correctly. So, you know, this wasn't a huge surprise to me. We had to go to Milwaukee. We had to face the pitching of the Guardians, which has been pretty good to say the least. And I think watching and listening to these games, and I felt at least a little bit better about this team, especially considering, again, we keep referring to the schedule, but truly the next 4 weeks outside of the Yankees series should be some good baseball for the Reds.
That's the good news. We treaded water while we had all those bad, scheduling conflicts early in the season. Thanks, schedule makers again. I unfortunately had 2-1 against the Brewers, Rob. I decided to have some faith, and that reminds me that we're Cincinnati sports fans, and we're not supposed to have faith. That's just how it goes. Yeah, the things that popped to me about these series in particular. I mean, you mentioned it a little bit. Alexis Diaz, we got to figure that thing out. David Bell says he likes how he's throwing, and I get there were some lucky hits the one against him this week, but at the same time, if it keeps on happening, how lucky are these? Is it maybe a defensive thing where we need to have defenders in or out or left or right? Maybe I don't know. That's something we have to figure out. Also, that game the Reds won against the Brewers was the most interesting end to a game I've seen in a long time. We had the tying run try to score in the bottom of the ninth with one out. They easily could have held him at third and waited for a new hitter because they had two more outs to get. Sent him home. He's out because he touches Tyler Stevenson's glove. Tyler Stevenson had tried to push him out of the way with his right
Yep.
hand, which would have made him safe, but his hand was on the glove before that. And if he did not touch the glove, he would have been safe most likely anyway. So I thought he was going to be out because Stevenson pushed him out of the way. And on the glove before that, he's out, two outs. And then second and third runners, two outs, bottom of the ninth. We are not getting anyone out. They decide to bunt. And you can there's video of the Brewers manager just sitting there like, what the F is he doing up there? What with two outs, why are we trying to bunt right now? So my takeaway from that week is I'm never gonna forget that game and the reaction behind a closer who was struggling and deciding to bunt with two outs and a runner on second and third after sending a guy home when you could have just held him at third. You know, those outs when you're going home are very critical if you have chances to score. And they lost one of their outs. They could have had one more out, and then with the last out, they just blew it. So I will always remember this week of baseball for that specific reason. I was laughing so hard when it happened because there is not one player in the world, even Ellie De La Cruz speed, who you want to be bunting with two outs because so many things. You can pop it out. You could foul out if you have two strikes. You could have someone else, not even you, because of your own speed, get thrown out. It is the dumbest thing ever. I'm glad that we won that game because the bullpen issues that we talked about with Diaz and the defensive issues, we had 5 errors in that game. 3 of them, I think, were on Ellie. So yeah, we're not playing good baseball right now, but we got the wins, and that's what matters. And that got 2 out of 5 wins. That's what matters. And I'm gonna remember that game for a long time, Rob, because that was really dumb.
Oh, it was unbelievable because what's funny is we were driving home in the car and I heard, and he like ties the game or something like that. He calls him safe. I literally like just turn the knob completely off. I'm like, I don't even want to hear this. This is unbelievable. How can Diaz not figure this out? And then literally 30 seconds later, I see on my phone, the Reds have just won the weirdest game I've ever seen, 6-5. I was like, what the hell? What just happened? I thought we lost. Like, what is going on right now? And I just couldn't believe it. It was the most wild thing I've ever seen. I had to go back and rewatch the replay because I'd watched literally all of the game up until the ninth because we were driving back home, and I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that I missed that. So that was a wild, wild turn of events to say the least.
And John Sadak called the guy an idiot. He called the base runner an idiot. I've never heard a play-by-play guy call someone an idiot.
I
I was
love him,
laughing
man.
because I don't think he was. I think it was just happenstance that his hand landed. I don't think he even saw it. I don't think he was an idiot whatsoever. But I love. I'm a big Sadak fan. I love him calling the games. But I've never heard a play-by-play guy call someone an idiot on the broadcast. That was really funny. So
Dude, I think whenever he finally got his chance, he was just gonna love whatever team it was, like to the nth degree. And that's what we're seeing with Sadak, which I can't believe we got lucky
Mhm.
enough to have Tom Brenneman give one of the most iconic, stupid lines of all time. I don't know if you saw, but Nick Castellanos hit a ball in San Diego and it hit somebody's laptop, and Reddit was using the Tom Brenneman lines for that laptop, and I just it was a nice chuckle to wake up to the other day.
yeah.
But all right, we have a couple other topics we want to get to. The Candyman. Joe, I have his stats over the last few months, and you and I had a lot of worries about this guy. We're like, he's a 240 career hitter. It's been rough, right? In April, he batted 189. Well, April slash March, there's a couple games in March. 3 home runs, 9 RBIs, a 659 OPS in 25 games. Then in May, 247, 3 home runs again, 11 RBIs, 759 OPS, in 24 games. So, definitely an improvement there. But it's been June, Joe. 356 batting average in June with 6 home runs, 15 RBIs, a 1090 OPS in 14 games. He has been the man. I mean, he's averaging more than an RBI per game. He's averaging almost a home run every other game right now. In the three hole specifically, because we were talking about who's going to fill the three hole. We didn't like him in the four hole. He's batting 307 with 8 home runs and 18 RBIs, by far the best. And it feels like he's solved our lineup problems for now, at least, by being in that position. Do you feel like he's finding himself, or where are you at with him? Like, is it just that he's like streaking for like a month plus? Where are you at with him?
Yeah, so famously, I said before the season I wanted him to hit around 250. That's fair to expect batting average to go up 7 points playing Great American Ballpark.
Hmm.
He's hitting 252 now, and that is crazy considering he was hitting 189 as you said in April and March, and he was hitting around 200 midway through May, and he's already brought it up that far. So kudos to him. I do think he is finding himself a little bit. Now, the thing with that though is like you have to know what to expect, right? Like I don't expect him to hit 356. I don't expect him to hit 300. I don't expect him to hit 280 the rest of the year. I expect him to be right around this average right now that he's at is 252 for the rest of the year. But the way things are rolling, Rob, I'm not sure he's figuring it out. I think there is some luck involved. We talked about some of the luck he had earlier episodes, like bad luck early in the season, luck
Hmm.
going his way. He's hitting the ball harder. He's getting home runs, and that's great. But just overall, that's kind of how it feels. I think he's a guy who he can hit that 250 for the year, but it might be 1 month he hits 210, the next month he hits 270, 280, and then it kind of balances out in the middle. That's what I would say he's doing. I think he's figuring it out a little bit, but I don't think he's going to be this hitter who hits 300 the rest of the year and brings his batting average up and is like a real star. He's going to be a key cog in the machine and hopefully be what me and you both want him to be at the start of this, which was just a good veteran bat who can sustain us when we are going through major slumps. And he was part of the slump at the start of the year, but he helped get us out of it too.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And what's interesting to me is, so I went back, I looked at last year's stats because that's when he truly came on. I think he had a great 2020 as well, but obviously limited at bats. Um, and it's been interesting to watch, Joe, to be honest with you, to see because his baseball savant page is actually pretty mid. The one thing he is doing is barreling the ball very well. He's a very high percentage of that. Otherwise, he's an above average hitter. He's like in the 60th percentile or something like that, which is that's fine. I mean, people are gonna be like, "Well, you're paying him too much." I'm gonna be like, "Well, no, we had a lot of money to spend, and I think he fit what they were looking for, and they were willing to overpay a couple million a year to get him to get what they needed out of him." And we're getting that right now. I mean, he's truly, I think, carrying the team. What worries me is this team feels like it needs one player to carry it right now at all times, right? Like we've had India carry, Steer carry, Ellie carry, now Candy carry, right? Like there are different people who are carrying at different times, and I just want to see this team really kind of find a groove. I'm not going to say he found himself, but what I meant by that question to me personally was I think since that season last year, this is who he's going to be. I think he's going to be closer to a maybe 250, 260 batter, which people are going to be like, well, it's not that big of a difference. I mean, a 20-point difference from his career average, I think is pretty significant. He's hitting around that time where up until about 33 is when you start to see people kind of break off. I normally like to say a baseball player's prime is somewhere around 26 until 33. That's generally when they find it. That's generally when they find themselves and are playing at their best. And he's, just in his age 30 season. So I think he's finding who he is, and that's going to be an above average hitter who's a below average defender, an okay runner, and he's a nice switch hitter. Like people got to remember this as well, and I think this is important. The fact that he switch hits gives him a couple extra points in my mind, in terms of what you're looking for in a hitter. It can really, I think, mess with the pitchers quite a bit. I think it helps the lineups a decent amount as well. And I'm hoping that I don't think he's the long term solution at the three hole. I think realistically he's a 5, 6, 7 type hitter for us in the future. But for now, we'll take him at the three. I don't think that we're going to really complain too much about that.
No, I'll take him at the three for sure. I think for now it's until he cools off or until someone else wants to step up, which Again, there are players who are hitting better, but it's still not exactly where you want it to be for the Reds. Now, if people, you made a point earlier, Rob, like if people want to say we're overpaying or they would prefer someone else, I can understand that. I think they probably overpaid. I think they could have gotten a better player than Jamer. But it does make you wonder. Like this, the slump at the beginning of the season when we needed him kind of stunk. This is like the best ever right now when he's doing this. But like, did you want someone more consistent? I don't know. And then you see other free agents out there like that we could have signed, like JD Martinez batting 293 for the Mets right now. There's different things you can consider now that we're in this situation though. Like it's fair to criticize the Reds off seasons and say, hey, they could have done more. They could have gotten an ace for the staff, which again we maybe don't need because we have these three young pitchers. But it would have been nice to have one since we started Frankie Montas opening day. It could have been like, hey, we needed a really good bat that's better than Jamer. Like, hey, I'm fair with that credit. I gave him a B this offseason. They did some, they didn't do enough. You can get guys like JD Martinez hitting 293, and again, he started late, so he's not as many bats as anyone else, but just something to consider there. I do think it's fair to criticize the front office. I will not criticize Candy after I did criticize him in the year. I only criticize him when it's fair. I do appreciate that he is both a left-handed and right-handed hitter. That does help. He's one of those guys who maybe his presence can help Ellie with batting from both sides of the plate. He's 243 against lefties and 256 against righties this season. So that would be my big thing is like maybe he can help out Ellie in terms of doing that because there's not a lot of guys we have with experience who can help Ellie with that. And that's good because we've talked about in recent shows that if Ellie doesn't get his batting average up from the right side of the plate, not right now, but it might be something in the future that he needs to give up.
Yeah, and he's been doing pretty well, I think, lately. I feel like I've seen his right-handed swing looking better. He had a big home run in the Sunday Brewers game as well. That ball was scorched. So definitely feel not like he's like I'm not going to say he's figuring it out either, but I think that he is starting to understand how he plays better and how he looks better as a right-handed hitter because I do think that there's a real world where if he can bat like 240 right-handed and bat I don't know, 280, 290 lefty. I think you'll take that, to be honest with you. But we'll have to see. That's kind of where his splits are right now, is there's like a 50-point swing between lefty and righty right now. And we all know his left-handed swing is better than his right-handed swing. But um, generally speaking, when a younger switch hitter comes up, their weaker side is going to take longer. It just takes a while. You're not going to have many Chipper Jones type switch hitters where they truly almost are equal on both sides. So I'm really hoping that he's starting to figure it out a little bit more. I'm liking to see the more power. He seems to be more confident in his right-handed swing as well, and maybe I would have to think Jamer's been helping him with that as well because he's one of the true switch hitters left in baseball because it's kind of a dying thing to say the least.
It's definitely something that people try to do, but with the way pitchers are getting better, especially with the spin rates and the velocity, it's getting harder to be a switch hitter. So it's one of those things that might be a lost art, and even 5, 6 years from now, might be something where you rarely see a switch hitter on the lineups.
Yeah, and we'll have to see. Maybe they'll eventually just switch him over. I'm not ready by any stretch. I want to give it another year or two. Honestly, I know a lot of people. I've seen a lot of Reddit comments and Twitter comments. Billy Hamilton, Jr. and stuff, and I'm like, you don't know baseball if you're comparing him to Billy Hamilton. This is a very different level of talent. Billy Hamilton basically only had speed, and we had hoped that he'd find the way to connect to the ball enough to be able to make that worth it. Whereas I think that Ellie has the potential to be truly a superstar. I don't think that Billy ever had anything close to that other than maybe elite defense and speed. Whereas I think Ellie can, once he puts it all together, and again, I said, normally you see people in their prime at 26 to, between 26 and 33. He's 22. So we still have many years left till I think he's going to truly hit his absolute, like, excellent status. And I do think it's going to happen. I know a lot of people are like, oh, we'll have to see. I feel confident enough to say, Joe, that I think he will get there. His work ethic seems to be there. And I think that that's normally very telling for a superstar, potential superstar.
Yeah, I think he'll get to some sort of star level. I don't know about superstar. I mean, and maybe it's just a framing of the way the game has changed. Like he may never hit for 300.
Yep.
He may not consistently hit 50 home runs in a game like we saw in the 90s steroid. Like it might just be something like, hey, he hits 275, he steals 60 bases a year, and it does all the other extra things too. But yeah, I do think it's tough for a young guy to figure this all out too. And I think that's what's good about this season is he is stuck at shortstop. We're not putting him anywhere else. Like it could be overwhelming for a guy to figure out a swing from both sides of the plate, figure out how to be in the major leagues, live in a new country, even though he played in the minors and everything. Learn how to be a big leaguer, learn how to fit into a team. I already said hit from both sides of the plate, but play multiple positions like he did last year.
Handle
Let's
the
keep him at
media.
short. Let's hope he gets through the handle the media. Let's hope he figures out the defensive issues at short, and let's again, I'll give him maybe till the end of the year for sure, and then maybe another year after that to figure out batting from the right hand. And you're right, he's doing better. If he hits 220, that is good enough from the right-handed side of the plate. But at times it has been right around 200 or below. That's where you have to have the conversation. So I'm not going to criticize him today on that necessarily, but it is something you have to think about. Like, it is a lot for a superstar to have to deal with all the media, all of that stuff, everything that we talked about, and maybe cutting out some of that extra. Like, hey, maybe you're not playing third base anymore. You're just playing shortstop. Maybe cutting out right-handed side of the plate. That can help someone simplify it a little bit and get a little better, I think. So that's something, again, not talking about it now. It's not going to
Mhm.
be something that happens in the next, even before the end of the year, but in the future, it is something that can happen if he doesn't develop. And we all know he's better from the left-handed side of the plate. His swing is way more smooth, but that also is, I think it comes with left-handed swings just so pretty. So I mean that's part of it too. But
Well, and there's
no,
so
I
many
think
more
he's
right-handed
he's
pitchers
fun,
too. Sorry.
Right, for sure. No, for sure. I'm pretty much done. I think it's not a conversation for now. I'm excited with the progress he's shown, and hopefully he keeps that progress up.
Yeah, he's so fun to watch, man. You would think he's hitting 300 with the way that his at bats seem to matter and the way that he does things and the way people get excited for him. I mean, the Reds were able to draw on a weekday a full crowd, like which I don't think have done potentially ever, or at least I know it was like the most crowd that they've ever had on a weekday that's not an opening day game, which is crazy to me. So that was just so that people could get his
Mhm.
bobblehead, which they didn't even have enough for everybody for. So it's just crazy to me. I don't know if you saw people were posting his bobblehead already for $100 on eBay, literally the second they got it. Crazy, absolutely nuts to me. But he's a
It,
fun player.
yeah, it was. If you're one of those people who goes to the game and just immediately puts on an eBay, what are you doing with your life? I mean, see, we're gonna have so many Ellie De La Cruz bobblehead nights throughout his career that, like, to be honest, they're not gonna be worth anything. I used to collect bobbleheads. I still do when I get them. I'm just not as fanatical about it. Your life is gonna be okay if you made a couple 30 extra bucks. Good for you, I guess. But I don't know. I think it's kind of weird.
I would agree with you. I'd agree. We have another conversation. It's going to tie into our question of the day, Joe. The NL wild card is the closest I think I've ever seen this late into the season. There are 9 teams all within 2 games of each other right now for the second and third wild card spot. Obviously, we're getting close to about halfway through the season. Once Marte comes back, speaking of quick tangent, is he is down and playing in AAA as we talked about. Right now, he's getting his 2 weeks before we will see him 10 days from now, Joe, most likely. I would have to imagine they're going to call him up on the first day. There are guys getting at bats that should not be, and he should be, regardless of how well he hits down AAA, unless if he's hitting like literally like a buck 20, uh, which he's not. So there are 9 games, or 9 teams all within 2 games right now. Only the Rockies and the Marlins are truly out of it, whereas the fourth place like wild card team in the AL is 3 games out. That just shows you how close it is. Everybody is in it right now, um, including our Redlegs. And it brings me to the question, Joe, of can we beat good teams? We are 12 and 19 against teams over 500. We are still 8 games back of the Brewers and 2 and 4 against them. Now, I think the Brewers will cool off. I've seen that lineup, I've seen their pitching and everything. I still think that they are still hitting above their level, not by much. They're clearly showing that they're a good team, but the injury bug really hasn't hit them, at least in their lineup, all that much. They have young guys that I think are way overperforming what they normally would. Um, and I think their starting pitcher looks better than their starting pitching looks better than it actually is. Like Colin Rea, I don't think is as good of a pitcher as his ERA and record and everything is showing. I went back and looked, and like he's done nothing pretty much his entire career. He had an okay year last year. This has by far been his best season. So I just think they're getting a lot of guys. I mean, Wilson, or is it William? William Contreras is having like an absolute stud season. Like I just feel like a lot of things are going their way, and I'm gonna wonder how they're gonna be, down the stretch. Honestly, if they keep it up, great. But I think there's a chance for the NL Central teams to come back. But I pose the question again, Joe, with all of that. Where do you think we are against good teams? Like in your mind right now, we've had a little bit of extra time. We do have a winning record against the Dodgers and the Phillies. Where are you at with our Cincinnati Reds right now in terms of good teams?
They can be good teams. I'm not picking them to beat another good team in a series for a long time. They got to prove it. I picked them for the Brewers this week. Came back and bit me. Maybe should have stuck to my gut with it, but wanted to be a little bit more optimistic about it. They can be good teams. It's just it seems like it's like when they're streaking, that's when they do it, right? So is it going to be predictable the next time they beat a good team? Probably not. That's just how they are. We can do it, but it also is like one of those things where it's not supposed to be expected either. We have this young team right now. Could we beat these teams in a series? Yes. Is it going to happen most of the time? Probably no, right? So the Dodgers have all that payroll. The Phillies are really good. They have a lot of payroll. The Braves have young stars that are a couple of years more advanced than we are, and they have guys hurt. So that's they're not doing as well as maybe they should be doing right now. But they're okay. The Brewers, you're right, like are overdoing their expectations by far. But those four teams in the National League, I won't pick the Reds to beat, even though they're done with the Phillies. And Dodgers too. I won't pick any to beat any of them, and for probably the rest of the regular season. But they don't need to, is the thing either. So that's the kind of good news that we have going for us here. Probably won't win the division. When you look at all the kind of mediocre teams, there's a lot of in the National League. We can beat up on those teams and get momentum going, make the playoffs. That's where I'm at with it. I understand they have beat good teams. I don't know if it's something you can really predict at this point with the way the Reds have played up and down all year long.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at too. Is I think they're still unpredictable. I'm not picking them to win any series right now. I want to see what happens after the trade deadline, though. I think if the Reds literally find one more bat, and I mean this like 100%, if they get one more solid bat in that lineup and maybe find a closer, like if they're really able to go out and get Brent Rooker and Mason Miller somehow, right? Like put together a nice package. I mean, that's going to be the package I think everybody's going for. It's going to be whether or not the Reds want to overpay and get it. But if they were to do that, then I would say, okay, now I'm intrigued. Now I think there's a chance, right? I wouldn't say it's a great chance, but I think our starting pitching is good enough. I do think we have good hitters. I think the problem is that our hitters are still very young, and I don't think we have that like consistent, solid bat that can help them out. Like I literally think if Matt McLain was in the lineup from the start of the season for this team, Joe, I honest to God think we'd be like 6 games over 500 right now and right there with the Brewers. I think he makes that much of a difference in your lineup if he's healthy, right? And so it's still trending from what I hear that he may be coming back. Looks like we may be losing CES and Brendan Williamson to the injury bug for the year. So I think they're going to have to go out. Today we're going to see Carson Spires pitch. We'll go over that here in a minute. But if Carson Spires somehow finds the form that he's been showing, maybe they don't need another pitcher. I'm not saying that I wouldn't love an elite arm, but Lodolo, Abbott, and Green have been great. So I think that would be the one area where you can maybe slip by. I'd prefer not, but I'm saying if they want to go out and get a bullpen arm and another right-handed bat specifically, I think that this team gets a lot better because TJ Friedel's come back and they've looked better. Candy has started hitting better with that extra person. Like I think Friedel has really changed this lineup that significantly. Since he's come back, they have been winning quite a bit more. It's been very noticeable when he is in the lineup, honestly. You're not relying on guys like Jacob Hurtubise to lead off the game, right? So it's just like, and he's been great, I think, too, for the most part. But it's just like, I feel like this team is one good hitter and one good relief pitcher away from, I think, at least being able to contend. I don't know if I'd still pick them, but I'm not picking them to win right now. That's for sure.
Yeah, I like your points there too. I think that can help. Trade the line can change things. How the rotation is set can change things too. If we like, obviously in the playoffs, which was what matters, we'll have those three guys, our three studs going right. So that changes things. But if those three guys pitch the series before, and then we play, whoever the Brewers the next series, and it's our fourth starter, whoever that ends up being, if it's still Frankie, and then it's maybe the fifth starter, whether that's Spires or whoever it is at that point, maybe we don't win that series. And that's not always how it goes. Like we've seen guys like Abbott pitch well this week and still lost, but it makes it tougher when you have three good starting pitchers and then a fourth and fifth spot that are just total wild cards right now. So
Mhm.
that's something to consider too when we're picking these things. Like in the playoffs, it might be a better matchup for the Reds because of the relative lack of starting pitching depth right now than it is if it were a regular season series. So that's what matters. Let's obviously make sure we get to the playoffs and everything too. But that's something to look at as well. Is like maybe there might be just a trade for a right-handed bat. There might be a trade for a bullpen guy. There might be a trade for like maybe a journeyman fourth or fifth starter who can just eat innings and be a little bit more consistent than what we've seen. Although Frankie did pitch well yesterday.
Yeah, he had
He just
one.
kind of gave it up at the end, but he pitched pretty well for the most part. So I mean he's okay. Just still not exactly where you want him to be. So that's kind of something to consider too. Is like if we're in the playoffs, it's a different ball game than if we're a regular season with how the matchups will be too.
Yeah, so we'll have to see how that goes. I think we've got a long way to go for sure, but I thought this is kind of worth asking because we really don't face many good NL teams at least for a while at this point. Like, yeah, we'll be facing teams that are in the wild card hunt, especially a lot of teams, in our own division, but I'm not too worried about it. Um, let's look ahead, Joe. We've got our last segment here, Pirates and Red Sox this week. We will be heading to Pittsburgh for 3 games. It will be Carson Spires versus Paul Skeens, unfortunately, in game one. Nick Lodolo versus Bailey Falter, and then Hunter Green versus Mitch Keller. I will be honest with you, Joe. This might be one of the most interesting pitching matchups I've seen all year long, like for us at least. It either feels like we're really ahead or the other team has a really big advantage. In game one, sure, I think that obviously the Pirates will probably have an advantage with Paul Skeens going, but Lodolo versus Falter, Green versus Keller, those seem like really fun matchups to me, to be honest with you. And I'm really excited to see what happens here. The lineups generally go something like this: Andrew McCutchen, Brian Reynolds, O'Neill Cruz, Nick Gonzalez, Rowdy Telez, Jared Triolo, Jack Sawinski, Michael Taylor, Jason DeLay, Brian Haynes, and Yasmani Grandal. Oh, and Edward Olivares. So some combination of those players will generally make up their team. Obviously, their big guys are, Reynolds, Cruz, Brian Hayes are their big ones you got to watch out for. Captain Jack, as they like to call him. Sawinski has not been hitting well this year. I'm surprised he still consistently is in the lineup, to be honest with you. But um, look, I will be honest with you, Joe. I went through and looked at this team statistically while we were talking a little bit too. They're worse than us in literally every single stat, at least team wise. I think that this is another team that, as always, they seemingly start out hot and they just kind of fall off right now. The big one for me is whether or not we can beat Paul Skeens. If we can do that somehow, then I feel like we've got a really good chance in this series. Um, Bailey Falter and Mitch Keller have been better. Their starting pitching has been pretty solid this year overall. Honestly, their bullpen has not been what I think everybody expected them to be. A lot of people had them ranked as like one of the 3 best bullpens in baseball. That has not been the case for them so far this year. They commit about the same amount of errors as we do. They have a lower OPS, or pretty much about the same OPS. They don't hit as many home runs as we do. They strike out more. They definitely don't steal anywhere close to as many bases as we do. They have a lot of guys on their team that I think are very streaky, to say the least. Um, I mean, I really think if you kind of pitch around Brian Reynolds and maybe keep Brian Hayes, I think you can kind of just beat the rest of this team without it being much of an issue as long as you're not leaving the ball over for Cruz or Telez. McCutcheon's obviously a Reds killer throughout most of his career, but he's not necessarily having a great season. So Joe, I would love to hear your thoughts on this team and kind of where you're seeing them as we look forward.
Yeah, they got some nice young talent, some veterans who maybe are just trying to hang on to, and ones that I like Andrew McCutcheon, even though he does kill the Reds. But this is a manageable series that I think the Reds should win. And like here's the thing for the Pirates, like I know we like to talk bad about them, or like they get talked bad about a lot. But at the same time, they've earned that right. But for right now, I think they're fine. They're young players. They have something to be excited about for the future. O'Neal Cruz, Paul Skeens. Um, that's something to be excited about. But the Reds' talent, I think, is better, and they also have more of it at different positions. The starting pitching in this series will be exciting to see. We get the mismatch of Carson Spires versus Paul Skeens. Um, that'll be fun. But I think the Reds lineup is the difference here. Has to be the chance where you get some hits here, you help out Spires by getting some hits against Skeens. I'm going to go 2-1 in the series, Rob. I think maybe they lose the one to Skeens. He's been pretty good so far. And then when the Pirates come to town in a couple of weeks, hopefully, or next week, I believe, hopefully we don't do a standing ovation like the Cardinals fans when Skeens pitches against us and kills us, but maybe that will happen. But I think we can win. We can win 2 out of 3. I would like to say the game we lose is against Skeens, but like we've said before, that kind of changes week to week about which games we think they're going to win. Actually, win the other one, so it's hard to predict by game basis. But I'm going to go 2-1.
Yeah, sorry everybody. My laptop for some reason wasn't charging, so that's why I had to run out for a second there. But um, I'm gonna go with a 3-0, Joe. I just don't think their lineup's good. I think Carson Spires has been solid enough, honestly. I don't think he's gonna outduel Skeens. But the one thing I've noticed about Skeens is that he does still waste a lot of pitches because he's young. I think the Reds are generally not great at taking a ton of pitches, but they've been getting better at it. And I think if we can get to their bullpen in that game, I think like we could win that game like 2-0 or something like that, or 2-1. Like I could see a very, very close first game. I don't think that Bailey Falter is going to beat Lodolo, and I don't think Mitch Keller is going to be able to outduel Hunter Green right now. I know their statistics are relatively the same so far, but they have not even had close to the same type of schedule that we've had this year. Like I think they've already played the Rockies twice. I think they played the Marlins twice as well. Like they're a couple game. Like they're just not as I don't know. I'm not trying to discount the Pirates in this series completely. I just think that it's a matchup that we actually are finally favored, like truly in most regards. And I think this team is playing with a lot more confidence. This Reds team is. So I'm going to go 3-0 for the first time all year. I've not done it yet this
Wow.
year, which means we're probably going to go 0-3 just to make me look really, really stupid. But I just feel like the Reds are going to fight their way back to 500 in this series.
Hey, I'd be happy with that. Also, a big series for people on Twitter. There's been a lot of debate over O'Neal Cruz versus Ellie De La Cruz. Ellie's been better. Ellie has the more potential. Ellie's probably going to be better at the end of
Hmm.
it. But if you like, honestly, I would say just I try to watch all the young guys and try to appreciate them for what they are. Obviously, not cheer for other players, not on the Reds, but like it's cool that they're both young and both have the same similar last name and are playing well. But just something to watch out in this series. I'm sure that'll be brought up on Twitter a lot. If one plays well against the other, they're both young, good players, so it makes sense. But I always hated the comparisons between the two, even though they are very both good young players.
I completely agree with you. All right, we move on to the Red Sox. Now, I will be honest, I've been discounting the Red Sox. I did more research this morning. I know I said the Yankees were the hardest series, which they will be our hardest series. I think the Yankees might be the best team in baseball potentially by the time that we face them. This Red Sox team is pretty solid, though. Statistically, they are a very solid team. Their biggest problem has been errors, Joe. They have had a bajillion errors this year. But it's going to be Andrew Abbott, Frankie Montas, and Carson Spires or Graham Ashcraft. I really think it's going to depend on how Spires pitches today. To be honest with you, whether or not he's going to get that next start, or whether or not they're going to bring up Graham Ashcraft. Um, I think if Spires, because he threw 7 innings in his last game and was awesome, I think if he comes in and does the same thing against the Pirates, I think they may give him a chance against this Red Sox lineup. I know Tristan Cassis has been hurt, but generally they're running out a lineup of Jaron Duran, David Hamilton, Rob Refsnyder, which when you're batting Rob Refsnyder third, it makes me wonder how in the world this team is hitting as well as it is, but whatever. Rafael Devers has been great. Tyler O'Neill, Connor Wong, Matsuzaka Yoshida, Emmanuel Valdez, Dominic Smith, and Sedane Raphael. Also Bobby Dalbec and Jamie Westbrook. I don't think I'm missing anybody too much. Realistically, Tyler O'Neill's been hitting the crap out of the ball. Rafael Devers is one of the better left-handed hitters in all of baseball. Jaron Duran is, I think, a very solid hitter. Yoshida's been having battles with management on not getting enough playing time and not batting where he wants to in the lineup. So we'll have to see about that. And then Bobby Dalbec has been on and off. Their lineup is solid. Don't get me wrong. But again, when you're batting Rob Refsnyder third at different points, it makes me question how this team is doing as well as it is. And it's not an insult necessarily to Rob Refsnyder, but it's just it's an interesting thing to see, Joe, is what I'll say. I'm very intrigued by it. Um, he is this team I think can be definitely dangerous hitting wise. And then their pitching has been pretty solid as well. I mean, they're top 10 in almost every statistical category. I don't know exactly who we're going to be facing again. These second games makes it a little too tough for me to predict most of the time, just because it feels like everybody ends up switching up. But how do you feel about us facing off against this Red Sox squad at home this week?
Yeah, they're an okay team. They haven't invested as much money as they usually do to be one of the top spenders in baseball. They're kind of doing some of the soft rebuild that like the Brewers are doing. Not going to work very well when you're in division with the Yankees, but hey, that's their own prerogative to figure out. Tanner Hawk's been really good for them, 7 wins. Going to probably at the midway point of the season be at 8 or 9 wins. That's pretty good.
Likely.
But this series in particular. Yeah, true. Yeah, this series in particular is going to be about avoiding the bats of Devers and O'Neill for me. There are some other good players on the team, including Duran, whose 3.8 WAR is very very good. But I think those left-handed hitters with those 13 and 12 home runs, those guys are more game breakers than Duran is really. I'm thinking, get those guys out, walk them if you have to. That's what I'm concerned about the most. Devers, especially. I mean, that guy's just been insane for years now. I do think there's a chance we win this series, Rob, because, like I said, they're not this stacked roster that we've had trouble with in times before.
Hmm.
We do have this one at home as well, which is exciting. It's always good to see some historical franchises like the Red Sox come to town. But I think the Reds can win this one. I don't think. I think, like, obviously Devers is better than any player on the Reds right now. But spread up talent for talent, they get really thin at the bottom of the lineup. As you mentioned, Bobby Dahlbeck is a guy that they've wanted to keep in AAA. He's one of those quadruple A players everyone talks about all the time. He's great in AAA, and then he comes up to the big leagues. He just can't figure it out. He's right in between. As you said, Yoshida's been struggling. There's some guys outperforming what they should be doing, but for the most part, there are some holes in this lineup that can be exploited. So just avoid the big bats, and I think the Reds can win this one 2-1 as well.
Okay, yeah, I was gonna go 2-1 as well because I think we play really well on Fridays, and that's an Andrew Abbott day. I feel confident that he can keep us in the game without a doubt. He's the one guy who I'm always like, yeah, we got a good chance to win when he goes. I think Lodolo probably is at that point too, and for the most part, Hunter Green. I think I'd feel really, really good about this series if those three guys were pitching. I would even potentially pick a 3-0 because I do think Green, Lodolo, and Abbott are that good against them right now, against these lineups, and I think our hitting is starting to come on enough. But yeah, I'm gonna go 2-1 as well. I can't believe I'm picking a 5-1 week, to be honest with you, Joe. But that would put us one game over 500, which I think you and I would be very, very happy about, to say the least. And it would put the Reds definitely in a wild card spot at that point. So they're gonna keep battling. I think if they can find a way again to win at least three this week, I think we're still very much in contention. I think a 1-5 week would really, really, really hurt this team significantly, to say the least. I think it would put us not out of like I don't know that we're ever going to be out of contention right now with the way the wild card is lining up for the Reds. But I want to see them start to win some of these bigger games more consistently, and I want to see hitting really start to also find consistency, to be honest with you. So, yeah, we're going to be going like that for our Red Legs. Let us know what you guys think. Do you think they're going to go 5-1? Do you think 6-0? Are you really feeling confident? Um, Again, I'm not going to underestimate either of these teams. I think the pitching for the Pirates is better than most people realize, especially their starting pitching. And I think this lineup, at times, while carried by two or three players, can be very, very dangerous. And taking them lightly, I think, would be a mistake. So, Joe, I think that's going to wrap it up for us. You got any wise words before we head out?
Excited for this week. Think that we can get some make up some ground on this wild card. And like you said, a bad week doesn't rule you out from maybe contending later on. But when you get to the end of the season and like we're at 86 wins and we needed to be at 88 to make the playoffs, then these games do matter. So not always the best thing to dig a hole. I know we've said it a couple times. Hey, if they lose 4 or 5 games this week, they're out of it. That's because it might be true by the end of the year when we're 83, 84 wins. We needed 88 instead of that to make the playoffs. So that's something to consider as we go through this. This is a week where like you said, Rob, let's try to get at least 3. Let's definitely try to do better if we can, but at least 3 and stick with it.
I hope that we get 4. 4 would be great. I'd be in a very good place if we did 4. But yeah, guys, I think that'll do it for us. So let us know again if you have any thoughts. Thanks to all of you who are listening on Spotify and Apple Podcast as well. And with that, we'll catch you guys on the next one.